Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the KISS Digital Academy webinar. So this one is going to be on font and paragraph formatting in Word. At the end of the session, I'll drop in a link for the feedback form, really useful to let us know what you thought of the session and anything that you might like to see in the future. So I'm going to make a start. Let me just close this. And the document I'm going to be working on is formatting text in Microsoft Word. So we're going to be focusing on the two groups on the ribbon called font and paragraph. In an upcoming webinar, we will look at styles. And for the styles and templates session, we'll be using options that we're looking at today in the font and paragraph sections. And we'll be looking at how we can set up templates and use styles to control what happens in a document. So this is going to start by featuring on the font and paragraph formatting. I'm sure we've all come across documents where things didn't quite go the way we were expecting them to. So hopefully this session will help you understand what characters can be in a document that you can't necessarily see and how we can resolve some of those formatting issues that we come across. So we'll start with the font group. So font formatting applies to individual characters, and to change the formatting I can select some text and then I can use the options in the font group. So the first ones are the obvious ones. We've got B for bold, Control B will give me bold, Control I will give me italic, and then Control U will give me underline. I have additional options as well if I click on the underline drop down, so I can change the style of the underlining and also change the underline colour. So they are my three usual options. You'll also find these when you first select some text appearing as a little pop-up box. So this is my mini formatting pane. And most of the options available up here on the ribbon will appear in that box as well. If I want to make the font larger, then I can choose the specific size. So these are the different size options, but if I wanted size 13, for example, I can just type it into the box, press enter, and I will now have font size 13. You're probably wondering what these numbers actually represent. My understanding is that the idea is that 72 is equivalent to an inch of printed text. So different font styles, which I can select from here, will give me different font sizes with these options to the right, because it will very much depend on the style of the font as to what size the number to the right represents. The other thing we can do is, if we're not sure exactly how big we want the font or how small, we can use the capital A and the smaller capital A to increase and decrease the font sizes in steps until we get the size that we want. To the right of that, I have a change case option. So I can make everything that I've selected sentence case, which gives me a capital letter at the start of the sentence and the rest lowercase. I can make it all lowercase or all uppercase, capitalize each word, which I think they used to call title case, and an odd one at the bottom called toggle case. You might wonder why toggle case exists. If you touch type and you don't really pay attention to what it is you're typing, the amount of times I've done that, and instead of hitting A, I'd hit caps lock. And then everything that I wanted to be capital was lowercase, and vice versa. Toggle case reverses the current case. So if you have accidentally hit caps lock, rather than having to go and undo it all or go back and take it all back to lowercase and just capitalize the bits you want, toggle case reverses everything. So everything that was uppercase becomes lowercase. So I can do that from in here. Underneath this, I have my font color. So if I want to change the color of a font, the last color I used is displayed as my default option, but the drop down to the right will allow me to use theme colors and my standard colors. If I want more options, I can go to more colors, and I've got a color wheel there, or I can go to custom and I can choose anything in my color palette. I've also got the red, green and blue, and for those of you who do anything programming related, you will recognize the hexadecimal number there. So I can choose what color I would like to format my font to. Just to the left of my font color, I have highlighting. So if I wanted to highlight a specific piece of text, I can select it and choose the color underneath to highlight. There are additional options. So if I wanted to do something particularly fancy, I've got my formatting, text effects and typography. So I've got some pre-formatted options that I can use in here, or I can define my own outline colors, shadows, reflections and glow. This also gives me access to different number styles for within the paragraphs, so I can choose how high I want my numbers and whether I want them spaced equally or whether I want it proportionally across the paragraph. There's also ligatures, which is how text joins to the next letter, and depending on the text styles that I choose, I can have ligatures that are available in different font types. So that's my special formatting. Just to the right, to the left of that, I have my superscript and subscript. So for example, if I wanted to say the third, normally when I press space, it will do this automatically for me. But if I wanted to make this superscript, then I can select it and click on it. And subscript does the opposite.
Yes, I'm doing
so
a class.
It moves it down to the bottom.
Something that I already know, but I'm just listening to it.
To the left of that, I have my strike through. So if I want to cross something out in a document, I can select it and then I can click strike through. It still leaves the text in, but I've marked it as a line through it. So they are my main formatting options. Sometimes when we go to format something, we've got lots of formatting already applied. If you find that you have a problem with formatting and you want to make sure there's no formatting applied to anything, I can select the text that I want to remove the formatting from, and this button here will allow me to clear all formatting. So that will take it right back to the basics of the standard font and size that you initially had. It will remove any of the additional options except for highlighting. To remove my highlighting, I would just select it again, and then on the drop down, I would select no color. So that allows me to remove formatting. There are additional options for fonts. If I click on this little more button in the bottom right hand side, it will bring me up my font formatting. So in here, I can see a lot of the options that we've got on the ribbon. So I've got the font type, I've got the bold and italic options, I've got the font size, font color and underline color and style, and then I've got my strike through, superscript and subscript. As well as that, I have double strike through, so 2 lines through, and I have my small caps option as well. So small caps will give me capital letters, but they will be at half the height of the standard capitals. So I said that font formatting applies to the text. Paragraph formatting applies to the paragraph. So first thing is to decide what a paragraph actually is. So what we would normally say is a paragraph is a series of one or more sentences that are related to a subject. When we finished a paragraph, we would normally press enter. Now, I have seen quite a lot of people who would then press enter again to get a gap. And that's where we start having problems. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on show hide. So this little character up here that looks like a backwards P is my show hide. And I can immediately see that if I clicked into this line here, which is a new paragraph, there is already formatting applied. So when I start typing, it picks up the paragraph formatting that's associated with that character there. That character is a paragraph character. the one that we see on Show Hide. And because we can format characters, even if we can't see them, I can add formatting to that character that I can't see until I start typing. We should never really press enter multiple times to get spaces between lines. So if I wanted to have a gap between one paragraph and the next, then we should instead be using paragraph spacing. So my paragraph spacing is in my paragraph group, and under the drop down I've got some default options for line and paragraph spacing. We're going to actually look at that in more detail. But the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of all of these extra paragraph marks that shouldn't be in there. The quickest way to do that is, believe it or not, to use find and replace. So if I use my replace option, or Control H will open it up, I've got my usual find and replace with, and we often use this for words. Find one word, replace it with something different. I want to replace formatting, so I'm going to click the More options. And in the Find What, I want to find special characters. So I can find and replace anything that I would find in the font, paragraph and tabs, for example, or in special characters, I can find paragraph marks. I can find section characters. I can find endnotes and footnotes. So I'm looking for the paragraph mark, and I want to replace two of those. So where I've pressed enter once, I've got the end of my paragraph, and I want to find where I've pressed it again to get another line. And I want to replace it with just a single paragraph mark. I'm going to click replace all, and it's replaced most of those. But there are some where I pressed enter more than once, so I'm going to replace it again, and that should get rid of the last one. So that's got rid of all of the extra paragraph marks that were in this document, and it's allowed me to take it back to single paragraph marks. Now what I'm going to do is replicate what I had originally, which is the extra space between the paragraphs. So the first thing I'm going to do is select the whole document. Quickest way to do that is Control A to select all. And then instead of using the default drop downs, I'm going to go into the More options in the paragraph group. So on my indents and spacing, I've got alignment, which we'll look at in a minute. I've got my indentation. Again, we'll look at that in a bit. And then I've got my spacing. I've got line spacing, and this is the amount of room that's given between individual lines, including within a paragraph. So if I set this to 1.5 lines and click OK, everything gets 1.5 line spacing, including within the paragraphs. Go back to selecting my entire document and back to the options. So that's my line spacing. I'm going to take that back to single. And then I've got my paragraph spacing. So this allows me to add space before or after a paragraph. I can also do both. So my font size is 11. If I want to replicate that, I can put 11 points of paragraph spacing after each paragraph. Gives me a little preview to show me what that's going to look like. But if I click OK now, let's turn off Show Hide. You can now see that I've got spacing between my paragraphs, but not within the paragraph. So this line spacing is still set as single line spacing, but I've added extra space between the paragraphs. I can make that stand out even more by adding more paragraph spacing. So let's take it up to 18 points. And now I've got lots of space between each of the lines of text. This is really useful because it means that you can control the whole document. So if you want to try and squeeze it onto less pages, rather than having to go and individually select the blank bits between each paragraph and then change the font size, I can go straight into my paragraph spacing, and I can just reduce it by 1 or 2 points. Take it down to 16 points, and I've reduced the amount of space that I'm using. So we start getting control over the document. The next thing we're going to look at is indentation. But as a rule of thumb, indentation is generally done as an extra way of highlighting something. So I think somewhere in here I have something that says tip. I want to make this tip stand out from the rest of the document. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the alignment. Left aligned means that my text will all start with the left margin and it will go far across as it can while it can fit words in. When it reaches the right hand margin, it will start a new line. If I center align it, everything will spread out from the center of my margins. If I right align it, everything will line up on the right hand side and the left hand side is jagged. And the other one is justify, which will add additional space where there is no paragraph mark to end at the right hand margin when starting at the left. So what this does is it spreads it out by adding a little bit of extra space in between each words. The only time it doesn't is when we reach the end of the paragraph, otherwise it can look a bit strange, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that in a minute. You've probably tried to change indentation by dragging these arrows up on the margin at the top. So let's see what they actually do when we use the paragraph options. So I said indentation was this section here. I can change my left indentation. So this is not the margin for the page. This is where the text starts relative to the margin. So if I set that to 1 centimeter, and I also set my right indentation by 1 centimeter, what I'm saying is I want this paragraph to start 1 centimeter in from the margin and end 1 centimeter in from the right margin. Click OK, and you can now see that it's moved these and this into the center. My margins are these grey ones here, and I can click and drag the margin to change the margin visually. My right indentation for this paragraph is this up arrow here, which I can click and drag to change that. And my left one is this arrow here. So the same corresponding symbol, which will allow me to move all of the fonts in. So now that stands out from the rest of the text around it because I've got it in a different space to the text that's normal text. There are additional options for indentations. So I've got left and right here. On the right hand side, I have special. And if I drop that down, we have a first line and hanging. So let's cover first line first. At school, we used to be told that when we started a new paragraph, we put 2 fingers and started in the space next to it, only for the start of a paragraph. And that's what first line indentation is. So I can indent by, and my default is 1.27 centimeters. I'm going to take that down to 1 centimeter. So only the first line of my paragraph will have an additional 1 centimeter indent. And if I click OK, you can see what that looks like. And that's what this down arrow is. That is my first line indent. So if I want to move it back to the start, no indentation, I can drag across. The other is the hanging indent. I'm going to find a different paragraph for this because I'll leave that other one as it is. So my other one was a hanging indent. And if I select this and go into here and choose hanging, and again, I'll set it to the 1 centimeter and click OK. So hanging leaves only the first line of your paragraph, starting at the beginning, and indents the rest of it. And that's what this little block at the bottom is. So if I grab the little block, it will change my hanging indent, she said, as it didn't. Okay, so that now no longer does. Back into my options, So this looks a little bit strange. So you're probably wondering, why on earth would I ever want to leave the first line on its own indentation and indent the rest of my paragraph? And that really comes about when we're looking at bullets and numbering. So I'm going to take that off now, and we'll start applying some numbering. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to select some text, and I'm going to apply a number to it. So my numbering options are up here. Click on the drop down and I can apply a number to a list. So I've applied numbering to just this list here. If I press enter, it will give me a new number. If I don't want that number, I press enter again and it takes me back to this original margin. If I wanted to start the text underneath at the same place as this text that's got a number to it, then I would want to use my hanging indents and my other indents. So let's have a look at what that numbering actually does. If I go into my more options, I can see there is a left indent of 0.63 centimeters. That's this option here, which is where my number 1 starts. Then I have a hanging indent of 0.63 centimeters, and that's where this text underneath starts. So if I increase this to 1 centimeter and this one to 1 centimeter, my number will start at 1, my text will start at 2. I click OK, I can see that appear up here. What that means is that I now can start the next line down at that 2 centimeter indent, and it will line up with this bullet or number above it. So in here, I can do a left indent of 2 centimeters, and it will line up perfectly with the text above it. If I added more text to this, so I'm just going to randomly type some things until it goes on to the next line, you'll see that it then lines up with the text above it. So this hanging indent makes sure that when I've got bullets and numbering applied, the subsequent lines in the same paragraph line up with that text above. Or I can apply it separately by adding my left indent and lining it up with my bullets and numbering. Sometimes, particularly when you are doing multi-level lists, which we'll talk about in a minute, you get lots and lots of numbers and then you end up with the text not lining up because it's too close to the number. So if you need to adjust where the text appears relative to the numbering to the left of it, then all you need to do is go in and change your hanging indent to add more space between it. So let's have a look at multi-level lists. I'm going to add some text. In fact, I'll use this here. And I will add some numbering to it. Notice that as soon as I do that, it's picked up the fact I've already got a number above. So this has started my numbering at number 2. It's assuming this is a continuous list. If I don't want it to start at number 2, I've got autocorrect options here, or I can go into my paragraph options and choose my numbering formats. So I'm going to go to autocorrect, restart numbering, and it will start it back at number 1. So I've now got a new list starting at 1 and going to 4. And as we saw, if I press enter, I get a new number and it renumbers these for me. But if I then press my tab key, I get a new level. So this is a sublist. So text 1, text 2, and I can press tab again and I get a sublist again. So this is what we call a multi-level list. To apply a multi-level list and change the formatting, it's this option here. So I can have my 1.1.1s and have them indenting each time. I can choose to have different bullet options, or I can have the same sort of numbering list, but all starting in line with each other. So this would give me my heading formatting as well, whereas the original one I remove the formatting from it. My original one will just give me those multi-levels. Notice it's taken out the levels that I had, but I can change those by coming here and pressing the tab key at the start of the text. The other way to do it is to use the increase and decrease indents up here, which do the same thing, and it takes it down a level each time or back up a level. When we do in the future series, the styles, we will look at creating your own multi-level list styles and how you can amend the formatting in the multi-level list. But for now, we're sticking to the basic single option multi-level lists. If I wanted to restart this at number 1, I can go into my set numbering value. So this is where I would decide what number that should start at. Continue from a previous list will link it to any other numbering I've got in the document, but I can start a new list and start it at number 5 if that's what I want to do with it. So I've now got my 1 up here, my 1, 1.1 and 1.2, and then I've started this list at number 5. So there are lots of different ways that your numbering can come out of sync and it can stop merging with the previous one. If I wanted this to be a continuous list, I would start by going into this list, going into my numbering value and continue from previous, which hasn't removed my options. For some reason, it does not like that, so I'm going to remove all of the formatting, and then I'm going to select this and apply my multi-level list. And let's hope that this time it will allow me to continue from a previous list. Nope, still won't. And it's still not letting me do it. Let's try joining them together and see if it'll let me do it then. Okay, not sure why it's not letting me do that. Hopefully that's allowed me to restart it. And I will just test that. No, it still hasn't. Okay, I have no idea why it's not letting me restart the number or continue the numbering from previous list. Let's see if it will allow me to do it from here. It's still not letting me do it. So what I would need to do is clear all the formatting and start that again and create my numbered list again from scratch, which should then renumber it. And it really ought to allow me to continue from previous. Yeah, that's not working and it should do. So I'm not quite sure what's wrong with my Word document with that. So we've got bullets and numbering. If I wanted bullets instead, I can come in here and I can select a bullet, either from my existing library if I've got some selected, or I can define a new bullet. So when you define a new bullet, you can pick a symbol. You can have a picture, so it could be something you've created. So for example, we might have the KISS Q as a bullet, and we can change the font type. So on symbols, the obvious ones are Wingdings, and there is also a symbols font that you can select from. And I've got various options that I use, particularly for things like to-do lists, things that you should and shouldn't do. But rather than just having a black cross and tick, I would normally want a red cross and a green tick. So I would select the symbol first, then in the font options, I would select the font color that I want, red for a cross, and then click OK. So this allows me to use a red cross, and I already had one which was a tick option that I can use, which is a green tick that I'd set up. So bullets and numbering can be tailored to suit your needs. In paragraph formatting, I did say that I would show you how bad things look if you didn't have a paragraph to the end. And one of the things that we often find is that somebody has justified set, and then instead of pressing enter, they've accidentally hit shift when they press enter, and it ends up looking like this. If I turn on my show all, my non-printed characters, you'll see that I've got this little elbow mark. So that's the symbol that you see on the enter key. And what I've done there is a soft carriage return or a break. If you hold shift when you press enter, it doesn't end the paragraph. So all paragraph options still apply the way they did previously. And justify says add space between the words so that it fits between the left and right margins equally. So because I haven't ended the paragraph, it means that I've got all of this additional space I didn't want. So this is really useful for seeing what we call non-printed characters, things like the paragraph mark, and in this case, that little elbow sign. So I can get rid of that. And now, because I've ended the paragraph on this line of text, it will take that out as well. Paragraphs can be formatted with borders. So if I select this, for example, and I wanted to make it stand out more, then I can add borders to it. I've got default borders, top, bottom, left and right, no borders, all borders, just outside. Or if I want to do my own thing, I've got borders and shading. So in here, I've got the different types of borders. So I can choose one of these types. I can also turn the borders on and off. So if I didn't want a top border, I could select the style and then turn off that border. Or if I wanted something different on the top and bottom. So what I can do is I can select the style, select the color, and then I can apply it to a particular border. So I can turn it off and on to apply that style. Maybe you want a different option on the left-hand side. Let's go with a grey one on the left. Same style, same color and width. And this time I'm going to turn off the left one and add it to that. The option that I need to pay most attention to is what I'm applying it to. So I can apply it to the text or to the paragraph. Text will apply it to whatever you've got selected. So I can actually format the font with a border. So that would be my text. Paragraph will format the entire paragraph, even if you've got nothing selected. So I'm going to apply it to the paragraph and click OK. So I've now got my border around my paragraph. And the same thing with shading. So if I go into my shading, I can apply colors in here to whatever I've got selected. Notice that even if I don't select an entire paragraph, because this color sits in the paragraph group, it will apply it to the whole paragraph. If what I wanted to do was just apply a border and shading to one particular word, then in here I can go to my borders options, and in the shading section I can apply a fill color. Let's do a nice lemony color and apply it just to the text. So that would only highlight my text rather than highlighting my entire paragraph. So anything from the drop down will apply to the entire paragraph. Anything that you then go into your borders and shading for, you can apply just to the text, either with the borders or the shading, or both. And there is a page border setting in here as well, which you can apply to the whole page. So here I've got whole document, and then I can apply just to sections. So first page only, I can apply a box border, click OK, and now just my first page has a border around it, the rest don't. If I wanted to align my text vertically, so instead of worrying about where it fits between the margins left and right, maybe I want to do a title page or something like that. And so down here, let's make it a reasonably large text. So the first thing I probably want to do is center it, but then I want it to appear in the middle of this page. So for that, I'm going to go back into paragraph options, and then on line and page breaks. Sorry, wrong place. I need to go to my layout page, and in page setup, in my more options, on layout, I've got my vertical alignment. So I can center this vertically in the page. So that's layout and page setup. This is also where I'd go if I wanted to change my margins. So if I wanted to have predefined margins, instead of dragging them from the margin from the ruler at the top, I can set it in here. And I also have indent and spacing on layout as well. So the next thing that I want to look at is tabs. Let me go back up to the top. I'm sure we've probably all hit tab to get the default amount of space. So if I click at the start here and hit tab, it indents it by 1.27 centimeters as the default. In fact, what it's actually done is it's given me an indentation because it assumes that's what I want if I start a paragraph and hit tab. If I change back to a tab, this is now a tab. But what is a tab? So tabs will allow me to put alignment on a page. For example, if I wanted to separate text and have some on the right-hand side of my page and some on the left, rather than me having to align the whole thing left and right, I can use a tab to left, right, and center align. So I'm going to put in a new page at the bottom, and Control and Enter gives me a new page, and I'm just going to reset that. So I don't want it to be centered, have it top, and then I'm going to have it normally left aligned and some smaller text. So tabs can be added by just clicking on the ruler at the top. So if I click here, she said, and for some reason it's not adding them to the ruler. Okay, that is a little bit annoying because that always used to work. Okay, so we put that back to the way it was. So if I click on the ruler, it adds a tab. So when I press the tab key, it moves to that position. And this is what we call a tab stop. So when I hit the tab key, it moves to the first tab position and stops. If I put show hide on, this is the arrow symbol that I get when I've got a tab in my document. And the default tab is left aligned. And you probably saw me go over to this little button on the left hand side where I've got this L shape. And when I clicked on it, it changed to an upside down T. That's a center tab. So what I've done is I've changed the tab style that I will be adding to my ruler when I click on it. So left aligned starts my text in line with the upright, and then my text flows to the right. A center tab, if I press tab again, will start in line with the upright and move the text left and right. So that becomes my center point. So let's see what they look like. a left aligned tab if I take this off for now. So get rid of the tab. So that's my left tab. If I press enter, see the tab remains. Now I'm going to use a center tab. So I'm going to take that one off and add my center tab. Tab key on my keyboard takes me to the upright position. And you can see that this is the center point for the text that I've added. And then if I take this off and I click here, I can now add a right tab. So the text will end at the upright and flow to the left. So I can move these around by clicking and dragging up here. I can move this one and I can move this one. So what that allows me to do is it allows me to have multiple different alignment options in the same paragraph or in the same sentence. So let's imagine that I was creating a book and I got chapter 1 and then I wanted to put in the page number. So page 1 and chapter 2 starts at page 6. The first thing is I wouldn't want these to come consecutively with just a space between them. And what we don't want is pressing spacebar to move it over to the right hand side, because we have no control over the positioning and it's difficult to line things up. So the first thing that I would do is I would select all of the text I'd already created and I would add a tab. So I can do it from the ruler at the top, but I can also go into the more options and click tabs. So tab stop position is where do I want the tab to be. And I'm going to start my page numbering at 11 centimeters. So at 11 centimeters. Then I want to know what sort of alignment I want. So do I want this to be left aligned so that the left hand side will line up, right aligned so the right hand side will line up, or do I want it centered? So I'm going to choose a center tab and then I click set. What that does is it sets it on my ribbon. So I can now click in front of the word page, hit tab key and move that text across to this point here. I can add multiple tabs, but another nice thing that I can do, particularly with something like this, if my text is a long way across from the original chapters, if I go back into tabs, so this is my tab now, I can have what we call a tab leader. So that is a filler, something that fills in the space between the two. I'm going to go with my dotted underline, click set and OK. And now what I've got is a nice little underline that takes me, allows my eye to follow from the left across to the right. And we've seen this being used in things like forms, where I want somebody to fill out their name and their address and an email. And then instead of using underline and filling in lots of underline space, what I can do is I can set a right tab, maybe at 9 centimeters. And then if I go into my tab options, my 9 centimeter tab stop is going to have number 4 leader, which will then allow me to have a line when I press tab that always finishes in the same position. If I want it to start later, I can press space, or I could set a left-hand tab. I set a left-hand tab here, then I could just use the tab key to move to the first tab stop and then set a leader line for the next tab across. There is one more tab type that I want to show you. So if I've got some numbers in a document, £100, 45p, £2,000, and 27p. So these are not aligned, and it's really difficult to align the tens and units, etc. There is a tab called a decimal tab, which will align decimal points. So in here, I could choose to set a decimal tab. I'll set it at 4 centimeters. So 4 centimeters, decimal tab, click set, click OK. And now what I can do is use my tab key, and it will align the decimal points. So even though this doesn't have a decimal point, it's lined up the values. So now my units, my tens, my hundreds, and my pence are all in line in my document. Looks a little bit odd because of my line spacing, but I can come through here and I can remove paragraph and line spacing, and then it lines up really nice and neatly in the document. So they're the different types of tabs that you can use. In the session that we'll be doing on templates and styles, we can build all of this into a document that you can then just open the document. All of the styles will be there available for you to use, and you can actually restrict the use of different font types and styles to just the ones that you've defined. So it's really useful to get to grips with what the different options are for formatting. There are additional paragraph options that may be useful when it comes to setting up styles, and I'll just touch on those now. So in my paragraph options, we've looked at the indents and spacing, but if I go to line and page breaks, this pagination option setting here is really useful. By default, you have widow and orphan. What that means is that it will never leave the first line of a paragraph on the bottom of one page with the rest on the next, and it will never leave the last line of a paragraph on a new page. So that's set by default. Keep with next allows me to keep one paragraph with the one that follows it. So what that means is that for things like headings, it will stop you from having a heading on one page and the paragraph that goes with that heading on the next page. Keep lines together keeps all lines of a paragraph on the same page. So if a paragraph doesn't fit at the bottom of a page, it moves the whole paragraph to the next one. And page break before. So if we're setting up a heading style and we want that heading to always have its own new page, that will allow me to force a new page whenever I use that style. So we'll look at these in more detail when we look at styles and templates, but knowing that they exist in your normal documents where you can choose to use these options in your document to keep things together is also quite useful. So that's font and paragraph formatting. Hopefully you found that useful. Hopefully there's some things in there that you haven't come across before. And I will drop the link in the chat now for the feedback form. If you could take a couple of minutes just to fill it out for us and send it back.